Welcome to the Good Grind Podcast. I am Chris Enroth, horticulture educator with the University of Illinois Extension, coming at you from Macomb, Illinois, and we have got a snowy show for you today, folks. I am stuck at home right now. It's snowing outside. It's getting cold. Winter has finally arrived. So we're going to be talking about snow today and winter. And what does that mean for your plants? And what can we do right now to protect our plants, especially when we're going out, we're shoveling, we're throwing down salt, trying to get rid of some of that ice, whether it's on the sidewalk or a branch. And you know I'm not doing this by myself. I am joined, as always, every single week by horticulture educator Ken Johnson in Jacksonville. Hey, Ken.
Hello, Chris. We haven't got as much snow as you, so we're still in the office.
I know. I can see that you're still able to go into the office and you're not. I'm hiding back where I was in 2020, away from my family, trying to steal a few moments away to do a little bit of work. So, it's bringing back memories.
Back when we opened up this can of worms.
Yeah. Now we'll close that can right now and put it away and not think about it. Yep. So, well, Ken, I'm glad to hear that you're at least able to get in the office, but it's about to get really cold in your neck of the woods, correct?
Yes, it's a slushy mess outside. So it could get interesting. I think so. People will be listening this Friday. So I think, may change from today on Tuesday, but we're talking below zero next week. So
yeah, should be potential highs that are below zero.
Yes.
So that's why we have the beards, everyone.
Grow your beards quickly. You got a couple more days.
Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here first. Grow your beards. So I guess, Ken, today we're going to give a couple tips for folks that maybe like me, pretty soon after recording this, we're going to have to go outside, shovel some snow. We got a couple limbs that are really weighed down because, kind of like you, it started out as rain, but then it froze. And so we have kind of a double layer of ice on branches and then wet snow on top of that. And so we do have a lot of lower limbs down. With that cold weather is going to bring a lot of wind. And so I'm worried we're going to get some branch breakage out there. But maybe we need to distinguish a little bit here. I have a combination, as I mentioned, of ice and snow on our limbs. But when we talk about the weight of something on a tree limb, ice and snow, they're similar. They're both water in a frozen form, but it's different in how we handle it. Could you describe a little bit about that difference?
Yeah, so both of them are going to weigh down branches and trees and whatnot. With snow, that is something you can try to remove if it's safe. If you've got broken branches hanging over your head or something like that, you don't want to do this. But snow, if you've got snow weighing down your branches and stuff, you can go out and gently brush that off, brushing it up to remove that, help relieve that weight. Then those branches should, come back up, spring back up. So again, depending on how far they're laying down, be careful when they start removing that. Ice, on the other hand, that's going to be kind of encasing those branches, and you start breaking that off, you run the risk of doing more damage to that branch than that ice is going to cause. So that the branches may become a little more brittle. You start banging on that, breaking that off, you're going to potentially damage those branches. So if it's ice, let it melt on its own, and whatever happens, just leave it.
Mm-hmm. And I'll add that, especially when it comes to snow, and maybe it's a limb that's above your head and you go to shake it off. One thing that I was taught to me is you never want to pull down. Don't pull down on it, because that you might be at the literal breaking point of that branch with that snow, and then you add a little bit more downward force and it snaps. So instead, if you can get like a broom or something, you just push up on that limb. A lot of that snow will shed off, and just shake it, as Ken described, like that. So be careful when it comes to limbs, especially big ones above your head. Don't pull down on them, push up on them.
And our trees have been around for millions of years and had snow on them for millions of years. So, you may lose some branches here and there, but for the most part, they will survive.
Yeah, they are adapted to this. Yep. Mm-hmm. So, and there's also some trees that are a bit more well adapted to this, namely some of our evergreens, but also our younger trees. I've mentioned on the show, I've got 2 brand new trees in the ground out in the yard. They're leaning over, but I'm not worried about them because they have very flexible woody fibers because they're young and they're supposed to be able to do that. But our evergreens can, right? They are also fairly flexible, and they have to be because they keep their leaves over the winter, and that's a little bit extra weight for them.
Yeah, you think about your conifers, when you typically think of where do they live, you think out in the mountains and stuff where we've got a lot of snow. So like another thing, they've kind of evolved for most conifers to have snow load and stuff on them. So they're going to be more flexible a lot of times compared to deciduous trees. That cone shape that they've got, when we think of our typical conifer, that's going to help shed snow. You think about our deciduous trees that have more ball shaped, that's going to catch more snow on it than a conifer. That cone shape will. Their needles are kind of smooth, so that's going to help shed snow as well. So again, they're adapted to kind of living in snowy conditions and dealing with that. So someone, again, you don't have to be quite as concerned with it. They can still get loaded up with snow and ice and have limb breakage, but that's probably not going to be happening as much as with more deciduous trees.
Yeah. And I think it really does matter too in terms of that branch angle of that limb, and sort of tie this in with conifers. Probably the one where I see a lot of damage is we have a white pine in our backyard that lost its central leader many years ago. And that means several of the side branches have tried to take over. So there we have these multiple tops to the singular tree. And whenever we get weather like this, we lose one of those larger limbs in that tree because one, we've lost that pyramidal structure, and two, those branch angles created by those competing branches, they're more acute. They're narrower, which puts a lot of pressure or force on a kind of that singular spot, that lower part of the limb, and so we get easier breakage in that case. And that's another thing to consider. Maybe not today or tomorrow or this week, but if you do go out and you prune, so you do some winter pruning, a good idea would be to look for some of those branch angles, and we call them crotch angles. We want them to be wide. 90 degrees is ideal. Doesn't usually happen, but a lot of the narrower ones, so a narrow crotch angle, which is very common in like an ornamental pear tree, which if anyone has ever had one of those in their yard, weather like this, you're picking up branches assuredly. So prune your trees, favoring those wider branching angles, and try to eliminate some of those more narrow or acute angled crotch angles.
Yeah, those more perpendicular branches are stronger. It's just the more perpendicular, the stronger that attachment is and more weight it can hold.
Mm-hmm. It's physics. Mm-hmm.
And I have seen some stuff especially with shrubs, where if you've got some of those that have really narrow, they're more columnar type, you can tie that stuff up and help support it a little bit. But again, a little late for that now, but once things thaw out a little bit, go out and do that if they're predicting more snow at some point.
I think that as we just kicked off recording, I got a text from my wife who's upstairs, and she said, I think we're getting 8 more inches of snow in a few days. So, hey, maybe you should go out and start. You can tie these burlap strips around like arborvitae or like a columnar juniper, if you have any of those. That will help reduce the snow or ice that can accumulate on them, thus reducing any breakage of those limbs. So without a doubt, seeing the type of weather, how it's shaped up from rain to ice to snow and heavy wind. I know, Ken, you and I are both going to get phone calls this spring about arborvitae who have like lost half of a side or something, so I'm expecting that to happen.
Yeah, probably. Job security.
Mm-hmm. Job security. That's why I keep sending the deer out. So they'll also eat the arborvitae. Again, job security. Well, Ken, another job to do out when we are removing snow is, where do we put this snow? When you're shoveling snow or pushing snow, do you have a specific spot where you push it to? Do you try to avoid pushing it to any particular areas? What's your game plan when it comes to moving snow?
So we've got a gravel driveway, so I try to shovel it as little as possible.
As little as possible, yes.
So we usually pack it down nice and good. And for the most part, here in Jacksonville, we don't usually get a tremendous amount of snow. There have been a few times we've had to shovel. And then I'm picking up rocks out of the yard for the next 6 months. But usually I try to do it, basically where that snow is. I try not to have one giant pile of stuff. I try to distribute that out. The problem with if you got giant piles, you see this a lot in parking lots when they're just plowing that out, they're pushing it up against plants. Depending on how hard they're pushing, they may be damaging, breaking branches, damaging that trunk if the plow blade is getting up against that. Same thing if you're shoveling stuff onto one pile and you've got plants under there, you can run the risk of smothering those and damaging those, especially for woody plants. So when you're shoveling, be mindful of where you're putting that. You don't want to pile that on top of or on plants, especially woody plants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's why. And when I did landscaping, I remember we did a landscaping job for like a Dick's Sporting Goods, and we did the parking lot, and we did the tree in the parking island, and then we did all these shrubs and things around the tree, and we're all like, this stuff is not going to survive winter. This is going to get snow piled on top of it, and then it's just going to be smushed. The tree will be lucky to survive. So, you do have to be very careful. Ken mentioned, especially those woody plants, piling that snow on top of them. Because it's, a snowflake is very delicate. It's beautiful. It's a nature's a wondrous miracle work. But when you get all these snowflakes on top of each other and smushed together and you create a snowball, ice ball, whatever, it's heavy and it can hurt when flung at someone's head. So it can hurt your plants too. Don't pile everything on top of your shrubs.
Yeah, and a lot of times, maybe not so much with residential areas on driveways and stuff, but sidewalks maybe with salt. If you're putting salt down and then you're shoveling that up and you're piling that all in one spot, you're just building up that salt in that one area. Whereas if you distribute it more, yeah, you're getting salt other places, but it's a little more spread out and you're not getting quite as concentrated in one area.
That's right. Well, Ken, you've brought up the S word, salt. So there's a lot to cover when it comes to a deicing salt. And I guess kicking things off, the primary, we look at sort of formulas, the chemical of salt is sodium chloride. And if I could be wrong, if anyone works for a highway department or anything, please let me know. But primarily rock salt is sodium chloride, which is can be quite damaging to plants. And as Ken had mentioned, I've seen this firsthand where people have piled snow maybe up on a corner somewhere of the sidewalk. And even though snow's water, there's still enough salt concentrated in that area to damage that turf grass or that shrub or whatever it is that's growing right there. Because salt acts as a desiccant. It pulls water away from living cells, just like, you could kill a snail by pouring salt on it. It does the same thing to plant cells. So salt can be very damaging. And so reiterating what Ken had said, piling up in one spot, especially, if you salted before that, you're concentrating that salt into one location, creates higher levels of sodium chloride in that spot.
Yeah, in addition to plant damage, you get salt in the soil. It's those sodium ions. Like salt will dissociate when it gets dissolved in water. Mm-hmm. Remember back to chemistry back in the day.
That's you used a lot of big words there, Ken.
Nightmares tonight.
Yeah.
But that if you get high sodium levels, that can cause issues with the soil, prevent clumping of the soil, which can lead to increased compaction, which is going to reduce aeration and water infiltration and all that stuff. It can raise soil pH. Now, you're putting out a lot of salt to do a lot of damage, but you build up over time. You're taking all your salt from a parking lot and putting it in one spot. You could start having some issues there. Again, those sodium and chloride ions, when they get into the soil, it can cause issues with nutrient uptake. If there's too much of it, they can compete with other nutrients for uptake with plants. So that can lead to nutrient deficiencies in plants as well. The chloride ions, those can build up in the growing tips, and you get some tip burn and things like that as well. So not only is it the desiccation, but you can do some damage to your soil there's the reason. I don't know if Romans actually salted the earth and Carthage and stuff, but there's a reason they talk about that, because it will mess up your soil if you get enough salt and stuff in there.
It is off. If the history books are accurate, it was used as a kind of a temporary weapon of war to salt the fields, maybe around where maybe an enemy was farming, and that would then reduce the amount of crops that they could grow, desiccates the crops. But it's very temporary, as Ken had mentioned there. Salt or sodium can dissolve pretty easily into a solution, and so we can remedy the issue. So too much salt does not lead to like a permanent effect on your soil right there. But the death of the cell of the whatever plant that it lands on, that is permanent. So we still have to often go in and do some repair work when it comes to like turf grass and things like that. The other thing I noticed, and I use this image quite a bit when I'm teaching like woody plants class, is the salt spray that occurs from like plows pushing snow, and that creates this spark, this spray of salt-laden snow onto plants. And so I've seen that happen quite a bit too.
Yeah, or even cars driving by when it's nice and slushy like it is right now. You get that salt in there, and spray that on plants, especially with evergreens. You get that on there. That salt draws out the moisture from the needles or the leaves if it's a broadleaf evergreen, and you get that desiccation, that drying out, yellowing, and all that stuff. And a lot of times, if you've got those near a road, you got that one side of that plant that's all dried out and dead looking, but the other side, which is a little more protected, is fine.
Yeah, and I'd say in that case, don't fight what is going to be. Sometimes there are spots where plants just shouldn't go, or perhaps it could be turf grass. A lot of places where I pile a lot of my snow is going to be either the lawn, or it's going to be just a blank mulched bed. In my old house where we used to live, we had rock mulch around the base of the foundation of the home and kind of spreading then outward. I would pile a lot of snow onto there. There were no plants in there. People who landscaped that before me put plastic underneath all those rocks, like actual plastic, which we do not recommend. Plastic does not need to go in the landscape, but it made it inhospitable to plants already. So piling snow on there was no big deal. So if you have a spot that just routinely gets hit by salt and the plants keep dying, and you have to go back and buy that boxwood again, replant it every single year, maybe a boxwood's not a good choice for that location.
Yeah. Or look for more salt tolerant plants, if possible.
Yeah, if possible. And there's debate on whether those salt tolerant plant lists, how much research has gone into them. I think for the most part, though, a lot of those plant lists, they're pretty much created based upon where the plant is found naturally. So if the plant is naturally growing in an environment with high sodium levels, high salt levels, whether it's by the ocean or somewhere else with high sodium levels in the soil, that's kind of what I believe has been used to develop those plant lists. Whether or not a lot of research has gone into it to see like, oh, they are resistant to rock salt. I don't know about that, but yeah, check out some of those lists.
And in addition to problems with plants, rock salt, sodium chloride is pretty corrosive too. So you got eating your car and the metal, and we've seen like stairs and stuff where like the concrete's breaking down because the rebar and stuff is expanding because it's all rusting out, and you got to replace stairs and stuff. So there's an additional caution for you there. Splurge for that undercarriage wash.
Yes. Get that undercarriage wash, do the sparkle wax, all that stuff. So yeah, make your car sparkle. So Ken, I guess, are there alternatives to utilizing like traditional rock salt that someone maybe could turn to reduce risk to plant damage to concrete, things like that?
Yeah, so there's things like calcium chloride, calcium magnesium acetate. A lot of these, they can go down to colder temperatures. So with rock salt, it really stops working around 20 degrees. So when you get really cold temperatures, it's not really going to do any good for you. It's still going to ice. Think about the ocean, it still freezes. So if it gets cold enough, it'll still freeze. Some of these others can go down like -20. A lot of them are still going to be really corrosive. Most of these are going to be quite a bit more expensive than rock salt too. So that's something to keep in mind. If you're only doing a small area, maybe it's practical. I don't know how many people that listen to this, are taking care of large parking lots, but probably not very practical for large areas like that. But there are alternatives out there, and some of these I don't know how easy it is to get, how common it is to find these. Maybe in larger cities and stuff, you can find them. But when I've looked around Jacksonville, I haven't looked in a while, but it's primarily rock salt is what you're going to find.
Yeah. And I myself have personally never used any de-icing agent, except for at the office where we have to keep the sidewalk clear so people can walk to our office door without slipping and breaking an arm or something. So, and I think we just use traditional old rock salt. And our plants that we have growing, it's a whole master gardener bed all along the walkway there. We've never had much of an issue there. So that's we also have a lot of sedums growing in that. Like that's actually our sedum garden, is that entry walkway to our office. So maybe plant some sedums in that area.
We bought a bag of salt, and I think it took us 5-6 years to use it at home. Basically, we do the stairs to get in and out of the house so you don't slip and fall down the stairs. But other than that, we don't really use it much. If we know somebody's coming, it's a little icy out, we'll throw some down. Yeah, don't use it very often either.
Yeah. Well, and there's also this other really neat chemical you can use, sugar beets. So I guess there's a whole, I don't know if it's a byproduct or just part of the whole sugar beet industry itself, where you can take the juice from sugar beets. I think some highway departments up farther north will actually mix it into some of their road salt, which makes their road salt more effective at colder temperatures. And so sugar beet could be an alternative for some folks, but it's probably difficult to get your hands on gallons and gallons of sugar beet juice. I know that's a guess. I've never tried. Maybe you can go on Amazon right now and get a 55-gallon drum of it. So I'm not sure, but I've heard though that people that use sugar beet juice to help in de-icing, it turns the snow kind of a reddish color, which looks like an animal has been slaughtered or something. And so, and also, if anyone has ever worked with beets, I have, they stain. Like they stain your hands, they can stain your clothing. You can track that into the house and stain your carpeting. So just a forewarning, it's kind of a neat idea, but might not be practical again for the homeowner. Some other alternatives perhaps though, and things that I have used kitty litter. I've used sand. And I have found those do work when you don't get that much snow, maybe that much ice accumulating. But I have a household then where we track in sand and kitty litter. And so if you do that, have the broom and vacuum on hand to get that stuff all cleaned up.
Yeah, I don't think there's any perfect solution.
No.
Maybe putting heating coils underneath your driveway.
Oh yeah, there are those people that have those.
It's kind of expensive though.
I guess I'm lucky enough that my driveway faces the south, well, more the west, but southwest-ish. So as long as I get a little bit of exposure to that dark pavement, it melts on its own with sunlight. So I just have to get a little bit of snow off there for that to start working.
You just beat it down until it's a sheet of ice, and usually there's enough gravel sticking up you can get some traction.
Yeah. The kids can go bobsledding on it.
Right into the street.
Yes. Well, Ken, do we got any more tips on salt? I know salt is a big deal. A lot of people do like to use it. We do get a lot of phone calls about damage. Is there anything else that we can give to folks? Say like, should we be using salt all winter long? Is there a cutoff point?
So I would say in general, use it judiciously. Don't go crazy with it. And it's relatively cheap, but it's not one of those things you need to be putting a tremendous amount down. The closer we get to spring, the more likely plants are to get damaged, like kind of March 1st. Sometimes thrown out there is kind of a not necessarily a deadline, but where you want to be particularly careful with using it. The closer they get to breaking dormancy, the more susceptible they are to that damage as they start waking up. You can try limiting it to high risk locations, so steps, walkways, things on an incline where if you have ice, it's going to be a little more difficult to walk, so you're not sliding down those. Clear your snow before you put your salt down. You don't want to have a bunch of snow, put salt down, and then shovel it all away. Kind of defeats the purpose there.
Yeah.
and alternatively, put the salt down before it starts snowing, so that way it's melting it and it's kind of getting rid of it before it starts accumulating, or helps kind of reduce some of that accumulation. Eventually, they know that if you have enough snow, that salt's not going to melt all of it. But that's another option to doing that. Like you mentioned, using some sort of sand or kitty litter, you can mix that with your salt, so you're not using as much salt. That'll help you gain traction and stuff, and as well as melt some of that ice. Again, as long as it's above 20 degrees, if you're using rock salt. Mm-hmm. Those plants, if you've got evergreens or even deciduous plants, can be damaged by salt spray. If you have plants that are consistently damaged, or you've got stuff that's by the road that will get damaged from time to time, you can try wrapping those in burlap to keep some of that salt spray off the plants, trying to protect them that way as well. You can try hosing off plants if they get a lot of spray. Mm-hmm. Probably easier said than done when it's really cold out, but
yeah, it's hard to do right now. Yeah.
Later in the year, if we get late freezing, you don't want to put salt down, or if you can still get the hose out. And then, we did mention, if you do get salt in the ground, it can cause problems, but it's not a death sentence necessarily to your soils. You can kind of leach that out, water that well, get that sodium and chloride down to that soil profile out of that root zone, and help that soil recovers. So if you do have areas where things aren't growing and you've had a lot of salt in that area, try leaching that out as well.
Well, Ken, I think we can acknowledge that snow, winter weather can be dangerous and hazardous, and people do need to be careful and be prepared for things that might happen. But also, winter is good. I like winter. I really like snow. I really do like kind of that winter weather. And if I didn't, I would go to Arizona and play with the cactus down there or something. So, but snow is good too. I recall we've had a very dry 2023, and we did get some rain in December. However, I think we got a good rain. It was a good rain. However, a lot of that rain, if it came as snow, and let's say it melted, that melt happens a little bit more slowly than, say, a rainfall happens. And we're able to get a little bit more infiltration in the soil, get back to those hopefully pre-drought levels that we had before, and where we were in 2022. So we really do need the snow. It is really, really important for the meltwater that it does create, replenishes after an especially dry year last year. So is there any other benefits though to snow?
Yeah. Well, going back to the water, I mean, last winter, 22, 23, we didn't have a whole lot of snow.
Oh yeah.
So we kind of started off the year off with a deficit right off the bat, because we didn't get that snow and stuff. So yeah, as much as people complain about it, it's good to have. So you got the water, it can help insulate plants, insulate the soil. So snow early in the year is going to do a little better job. The more that soil is exposed to cold temperatures, the deeper it's going to freeze, which could be a good or bad thing. The deeper it freezes, the more frost heaving you're going to have, which can, heave up plants and cause some problems. But it also helps break up compaction, kind of turn the soil a little bit, get seeds down in there and stuff. So that's a little bit of a double-edged sword, that frost heaving. I think most people would probably think of it as a bad thing, but there is some benefit to that too. But if you get snow on the ground there earlier in the winter, it doesn't freeze as deeply, which can help prevent some of that. If you get deep enough snow, 4, 5, 6 inches, I've seen stuff where it can be that surface level under that snow can be 20, 30 degrees warmer than it is above the snow. If you get like it's like they're predicting negative temperatures that at the surface there, it may be low 30s, upper 20s, where above ground it's negative 10, 20 degrees. So that can help insulate the soil, insulate plants, protect them from that winter, that cold damage, and stuff like that, and help prevent them from being heaved out of the ground as we get those soil temperature fluctuations.
Yeah, folks. So I know I turn on the news and they're like, oh man, winter. I'm like, yes, it is winter. You live in the Midwest. It's going to happen. So don't complain about it. Be happy, celebrate it, but be careful, take precautions. It is the sight of the season right before the winter storm. Everybody's going to the grocery store to get their milk, their eggs, and their bread. And we were there too. I will admit it that we were there at the grocery store the day before it all started snowing here this week. So
a big old bag of flour so you can make bread if need be.
Oh yes. I love homemade bread. Now I'm hungry. Ken, you did it to me again. Well, that was a lot of great information about what to do now that winter weather has finally arrived this winter of January 2024. So hopefully these tips will help people stay safe, protect your plants, and enjoy the cold winter weather, the 4 seasons that we have here in this part of the world that we're so lucky to get. So, the Good Growing Podcast is a production of University of Illinois Extension, edited this week by me, Chris Enroth. A special thank you to Ken Johnson for hanging out with me, chatting about what we're going to be doing, what the snowmen that we're going to be building, the forts we got, the igloos we got going. We have got all kinds of plans here. And so thank you, Ken, for hanging out with me today, talking about winter.
Yes, thank you. I'm excited for the snow. And remember, lift with your legs, not your back.
That's right. Take it in layers, too. Don't try to take all the snow at one time. Do it in layers.
Send the kids out. Or grandkids.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And try to bribe them with hot chocolate. That seems to work in my house. At least it'll get a quarter of the driveway done.
Get a little done.
A little bit, yeah. So,
and let's do this again next week.
Oh, we shall do this again next week. We got all kinds of things to chat about. Ken's going to be coming at you with a garden bite. So look forward to that next week. So listeners, thank you for doing what you do best, and that is listening. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, watching. And as always, keep on growing.